The Sony Bravia series televisions have received a bit of a change, as you guys know, with the new 2024 lineup, and I'll be giving you my take on that. So smack a like on this video because we're going to get to the point right now. In essence, I think it's kind of what we've been seeing from Sony for, the last several years now. They are desperately trying to save themselves. And let me explain. Back in 2013, give or take, I used to work for Sony, right? And they were basically getting rid of things like VIO and trying to cut costs. When I no longer worked for them, I noticed I started seeing, again, more cheaping out of materials. They went from, like, on the 900E, for example, having these premium finishes all around their televisions, to then having some, like, bargain basement, cheap plastic all around in their build quality. You know, it just went from bad to worse, and Sony kind of is going that way. I mean, think about it. They used to have quantum dots inside of their televisions with triluminous, and that's what triluminous used to mean, and then they removed it and put phosphor in instead, without saying a word or telling anybody, to make us believe that they were still a triluminous TV, which again was all about quantum dot TVs. And again, it's Sony kind of year after year after that point in time just kind of cutting costs every which way they could, and now we're at a point in time where they don't even want to make a QD OLED right now. Their line consists of a handful of TVs. They've done their whole renaming structure, but none of them are impressive at all in terms of the everyday person. Now, if you're rich and you've got like $3,000 to drop on a TV at any given moment, then this does not apply to you. But for the most of us out there that want quality sets, Sony is just kind of redundant, pointless. And the thing that Sony has to realize is the mass majority of people in an inflated market like now are not going to have $3,000 plus, because the average price is like $3,200, right? For their kinds of sets, especially when you talk about the Bravia 9. Now, of course, one can argue don't go for the most premium set, but then if you go for a mid-range TV with Sony, you literally are pissing your money down the drain, because you can go with Hisense and get every single thing you could ever dream of at the highest level for so much less. Then look at TCL, more of the same. The benefit for Sony and every other manufacturer is disappearing almost overnight. Now, yes, they have innovations in backlight technology and yada, 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 but it's still LED, which means you're still going to have some issues with blooming here and there, touch and go, depending on what you're looking at. And if, let's say, they're flawless and you have no issues with blooming, you're still going to have the viewing angle limitation. Let's say they somehow fix that and you don't have any limitation with viewing angles, you're still, no matter what, not going to have quantum dots in their Sony Bravia 9, because Sony went to phosphor instead of, again, quantum dots. And it's everything to do with cutting costs, saving themselves from what I assume is a dying brand. They are going the route of charging way too much money for things that honestly can be acquired on the market right now. I mean, think about 4,000 nits, 5,000 nits. These TVs are going to be achievable in 2024 this year by TCL, by Hisense. And we're not going to have to kill ourselves to get a hold of these TVs like you would on a Sony. And that's just something to think about. Now, people argue processing and yada yada. Sony has been selling that XR processor for years now. It is an old processor now. I think we can use that word since it's been kind of touted around for quite a few years now. There used to be like every other year, like every 2 years or so, they would come out with, updates to the processor, like XR, Reality Pro, X1 Extreme chip, X1 Ultimate chip, and then the XR chip. And then after the XR chip, Sony just sat on their hands and they're not doing anything extra. Now, me personally, I don't really like this approach because it shows me that Sony isn't the Sony that I love. Now, full disclosure, I love Sony as a brand. I think they make some awesome products. My Sony HTZ9F soundbar, perfect example. I love watching movies on that thing. It still kicks to this day. Sony PlayStation 5, amazing. However, there is an argument for a lack of quality when you see it and needing to point that out. And that's what I see with the whole renaming structure. I mean, you have the Bravia 3, the Bravia 7, the Bravia 9. These are forgettable TVs at best, in my opinion. Now, to be fair, the Bravia 9, being the most promising out of all of them, is still not really doing it for me personally, because how do you go from the Sony A95L, a quantum dot OLED, capable of a good picture quality and it had room to improve, to now saying, you know what, we're just going to go with LED. That's going to be our flagship. It shows that Sony is bleeding money. It shows that Sony is not able to keep up with what Samsung is doing with TVs like what's in front of me right now with the S95D. Say what you will about the matte finish screen, it is still a QD OLED and it will still bake the pants off of the vast majority of the TVs you will see this year. So again, especially when I'm rocking my settings on this thing, it's not going to be some bum TV like everybody keeps trying to pretend like it's going to be going up against other things this year. Now again, I feel like Sony will have a beautiful picture on the Bravia 9 and people will enjoy it. That's not the argument. The argument now kind of comes back down to what it's always been. Cost to value ratio. I mean, it's almost like a running joke. Everybody laughs at the idea that, we think Sony, and then we immediately go, well, should we just add a few zeros on the end of the price tag? Because everybody knows Sony is overcharging us now. Because if you think about how much it must have cost them to manufacture an LED and a board filled with LEDs to show you all the lights, it does not cost that much. And they are charging an arm and a leg for something that frankly will be outdated, almost like a used car, the moment it leaves the store. And then the resale value is like trash. You won't really get much of anything for it. And that's the point. These TVs only have a year of life on them before they're discontinued. And the price points are so high that it just doesn't make any sense. Enter in the fact that the technology every year has some new jargon, some new terminology, something new to hook you in and make you buy it. It just feels like, honestly, we have reached ultimate diminishing returns to now we're going back to what they started selling back in like 2000 and even, I'd say, 17, where it was all about brightness and, oh, look at the nits. And now we're back to the nit range conversation where it's like, hey, you know what? We have, 1,500 nits. Oh, we have 4,000, 3,000. They want to throw as many nits at you, up to 10,000 nits this year. And that's all fine and well. But with a TV, for example, like the Samsung S95D in front of me, more than anything, how many nits you have means nothing. It all matters on how you control that brightness. And ultimately, we haven't seen that on the Bravia 9. I think the Bravia 9 will have the strongest ability to show us something that Sony is capable of to return back to the old Sony. But I think even when we talk about all that, the one thing that I never hear, and still year after year, I don't hear, after reporting on this year after year, I don't hear that we have good motion. And motion is one of those things that I hope gets better, as it's been really abysmal. But only time can tell. I don't really have the highest hopes for Sony's lineup this year. It feels kind of cheap, if I'm being very honest, in comparison to what we had last year. I feel like they had a decent and full-fledged lineup, where this year it feels like a cost-cutting lineup where they can't even announce a quantum dot OLED. That is a weak move to me, considering that for 2 years they had one and then now they're just like, we can't keep up. It shows weakness. And I feel like if you're going to show weakness, then you shouldn't have even entered the field if you weren't going to play the right way. But that's my personal opinion. Other people may have their takes, but that's just mine if you guys wanted to know. Let me know what you think about the Bravia 9 and their new renaming structure. I think, again, it's good that they made the naming structure easier for people. Bad that it's not a full-fledged lineup of TVs. I think if they would have come out with, I don't know, let's say a Bravia 1 all the way to like a Bravia 10, I think that would have made more sense. And I feel like the more flagship of it should have probably been like the Bravia 1. I feel like that would have made more sense because, if you remember back in the old days with the Sony A1E, to be particular, the A1E, I mean, that annotation showed the most premium at the time. And I feel like if they went back to that and they were like the Bravia, X1, whatever they end up calling it, right? The Bravia 1, right? The Bravia 2. I feel like those should have been premium and the higher numbers should have been the more cheap ones, because 1 being your best one in your lineup. But they had to add some level of complexity to it. But either way, I mean, it's okay. It's only changing, I guess. We'll see what it looks like. I mean, I'm not going to judge the TV before I see it, but I don't really have the highest hopes that it would be a competitive or compelling offer given the, $32.99 price tag for just a 65-inch, when we know for a fact Hisense is going to be 3,000 nits this year, and the Bravia 9 is up to 4,000. So that's only 1,000 nits that you're losing for something I promise you is going to be substantially cheaper, have every bit as good black levels. And honestly, Hisense has been doing the best they've been doing since like the H9F I've been reporting on. I mean, it just feels like there are too many options now, and it's too little too late to try to re-enter the LED market when they already started off that way, walked away, and now they want to come back now that they see the excitement for TVs like, again, the TCL QM series and the Hisense U series. And I just think, again, too little, too late. Yes, the purists and rich people with way too much money will throw their money at it, but the everyday person will still buy Hisense and TCL because the picture quality is every bit as good as those flagship models. Which I'm glad now we finally have people like Digital Trends reporting on this, because I remember back in the H9F days, nobody wanted to give Hisense a chance, and I was literally the only one back then. So it's good to see, like, now everybody's now trying to kiss Hisense's ass, but people are starting to say what I've been saying day one. Just buy TCL and Hisense and save yourself the trouble. If you are one of those ignorant people that say it's cheap Chinese garbage, CCP, blah, 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 then overpay and then get what you want. But at the end of the day, I can promise you this, you will run into censorship and problems on every single TV in some way, shape, and or form, whether it's ads, whether it's you not being able to roll back firmware. There's always something, right? And I have not seen anything about CCP with any of these Chinese TVs. I think at this point, it's people just being prejudiced for the sake of being prejudiced against the Chinese manufacturers. But again, that's just my opinion. I've had a Hisense U8G right now for years, and I haven't had anything happen to me. My data's not stolen, no breach of my bank accounts or any crazy crap like people suggest. So again, it's all about like the way we change our minds around the American propaganda, which I will say that openly on this channel. There's a lot of propaganda in this country when we talk about consumer products, and this belief that like, oh, anything Chinese or anything made in Mexico or here or there is bad, and like other countries exist for a reason, okay? And maybe they do something a little better than we do. That's just a thought there. But that being said, I also understand that there is a time and there is a place to be critical, and I don't really think it's now with the Bravia 9, although I don't expect a lot, if that makes sense. But again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty. Just wanted to give you guys a raw take of this, and in case anybody's wondering, the TV in front of me is the Samsung S95D, my personal TV right now. So again, in case I had that question. But yeah, until the next video, I'll see you guys later.